You're listening to the Sex and Psychology Podcast, the sex ed you never got in school and won't get anywhere else. I am your host, Dr. Justin Lehmiller. I am a social psychologist and research fellow at the Kinsey Institute and author of the book, Tell Me What You Want, The Science of Sexual Desire and How It Can Help You Improve Your Sex Life. Having children can be a wonderful thing. It can also be a really stressful thing too, because becoming a parent changes everything in your life, including your sex life. Case in point, I just did a quick online search about how parenthood affects sex, and these are some of the top headlines. Why your sex life disappears after having kids, low libido after having babies can last for years, and the baby came, but the sex went. You get the idea. It's super common for new parents to struggle with sexual desire and even with finding the time to have sex or to maintain any type of intimate connection with one another. So what can parents do to get things back on track? That's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to explore why being a parent these days is more stressful than ever, why having kids can mess with your sex life, how to make your relationship a priority again, how to navigate conflict in healthy ways, and so much more. If you're a parent or thinking about becoming one at some point in the future, this episode is going to be really important to check out. My guest is Dr. Rebecca Howard-Udy, an ASEX certified sex therapist who helps couples navigate sex, desire, and connection, even when life and kids make it feel impossible. Certified in emotionally focused therapy, she specializes in the ever-changing dynamics of relationships, especially in the whirlwind of parenting. This is going to be another fascinating conversation. Stick around and we're going to jump in right after the break. For nearly 80 years, the Kinsey Institute has been the place where sex and relationships are understood. Now, you can help advance its expert-led research. This month, the Match Group is offering an incredible 2-to-1 match for all gifts to the Kinsey Institute Research Fund in recognition of its vital impact. Your donation will help fund important research on topics such as sexual well-being and aging, sexual assault prevention, shifting dating trends, and the impact of AI and technology on relationships. Donate now to help maintain the Kinsey Institute as the global hub to explore, discover, and share knowledge about sexuality, relationships, and human behavior. Be part of this crowdfunding campaign and make your gift to the Kinsey Institute Research Fund go further this October. Visit kinseyinstitute.org to participate in the Make Your Match campaign and support sex science. Hi, Rebecca, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Justin.
It's great to have you here, and I'm really excited to talk about your new book. So you recently published a book titled Parents in Love, A Guide to Great Sex After Kids. So tell us a little bit about the story behind this book. What led you down the path of wanting to write a whole book about navigating your sex life as a parent?
So a lot of this came from my clinical work. In my clinical practice, I work mostly with couples and mostly with couples in long-term relationships. Many of them are parents, and I myself am a parent. So I have 2 young kids, and it's just really challenging to find time to have any sort of connection with your partner after kids, and especially a sexual connection. It so often gets pushed onto the back burner and asked to wait and asked to wait. And then when folks try to come back to each other, it can be really challenging.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I've certainly heard those stories from many people over the years about the challenges that having kids can pose when it comes to the parents maintaining any type of intimate connection. So let's talk a little bit about modern day parenting. I think that in many ways, it's harder than ever for parents to have an intimate connection and to keep it strong because the nature of parenting has just changed. It's become a lot harder in many ways. And as some evidence of this, the US Surgeon General actually put out an advisory on the mental health of parents last year, calling it an urgent public health issue. Parents today are just way more stressed and overwhelmed than adults who don't have kids, and that's very taxing on their health and well-being. So I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about why it seems that parenting today is more stressful than ever and what that means for parents' ability to maintain intimacy.
Yeah, you're spot on. So the way that we parent now is really a full contact sport.
Mm-hmm.
All parents want to give their children as much as they possibly can. But parenting today has really become something that it's almost like we're doing our kids a disservice if we don't sign them up for all the sports and, get on the floor and play with them and get involved with them and listen to their feelings and validate. And, none of this is bad, right? Like this newer way of parenting is really great. There's nothing wrong with it, but it may have gotten a little bit out of balance. There was a study that was done that showed that mothers, full-time working mothers, spend more time with their kids now than stay-at-home moms in the 70s did.
That's fascinating.
Isn't that fascinating? They didn't even look at dads. Like most of the dads that I know, most of the two-parent households, both parents are spending a ton of time. They're coaching. They're really involved. We all have the same amount of time. And so because we all have the same amount of hours in the day, when we're spending so much time investing in our kids, that naturally means that we're not investing in other areas of our lives. And that may be, personal fitness, it may be wellness, those things, but certainly a place that's often asked to wait and wait and wait is the relationship. And so that really becomes a problem because not only do you have a real lack of time, like this is not a perceived lack of time, it's a real lack of time in between jobs and the way that we parent, there's also social pressure. So for instance, both of my kids are I have a 4th grader and a 5th grader, and sports now really feel like if you don't get your kid involved in sports early, it's really challenging for them to then get involved later on. And so there is this social pressure to kind of keep up with what other people are doing.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were speaking about generationally how much this has changed. If you go back to my grandparents' generation, when they were kids, they were very autonomous, right? They weren't involved in a bunch of after school activities, but they kind of had to be pretty self-sufficient and figure out how to entertain and take care of themselves, right? And then if you go back to, when I was a kid, my parents were more involved and I was involved in a lot more activities, but it's not like the kids today. Like the parents I know today, all of their kids are involved in either multiple sports or multiple other school activities, whether it's music or band or there's all kinds of things that you can do at school for extracurriculars. But, they're all involved in so many activities and their kids really become their lives and they're constantly like carting them around town to take them to this or that activity. There's really not a lot of time left for themselves or for the connection between the partners. So it's just a very different state of affairs today if you're having kids. And I think you're so right that there is all of this pressure heaped onto parents to get your kids involved in as many things and try and set them up for success as best you can. And I think it's really well intentioned. They really care about their kids and their welfare and they want to, like I said, set them up for success. But that comes at a cost. The more that you're investing in getting your kids involved in all of these activities, it just leaves little left over for you to focus on yourself, let alone on your relationship.
That's exactly right. And so this lack of time that really puts a damper on reconnecting. And it's not just the actual lack of time. What this sort of schedule does is it makes parents, even parents who are really deeply invested and driving their kids all over the place and doing all of the things, it makes them feel like often they're not doing enough. So even as we do so much, we feel like we should be doing more. And going through our days and our relationships with our children, with our partners, with our friends, feeling like we're not doing enough, that's exhausting for the nervous system. And so parents get to the end of the day, right? Like imagine you're at 8:30, 9:30 at night. The kids are asleep. You finally have a moment. Maybe you can have sex with your partner. But your nervous system after this day tends to be not in a receptive place. You want to probably doom scroll on your phone and then like pass out. What I hear a lot from parents is this feeling of being touched out. And this might be more common when parents have really young kids, but the feeling persists, this absolute exhaustion. And what that tells me is that there's a real nervous system response to this incredibly high intensity parenting that we're doing. And it's not just parenting, right? So this is certainly, we're talking about parents, but I also think that there's a high intensity in career. There's high expectations for what a relationship should be, what a career should be. So even for folks who don't have kids, this may also sound very relatable to them, that our nervous systems are just overtaxed.
And it's so true. Like at the end of the day, you're exhausted. You're probably going to be too tired for sex, but you might also be too anxious to do it. Like you can't relax because you're thinking about how you have to do this all over again tomorrow, and what are the things that are on fire at work and where are the places that your kids need to be. And it's overwhelming in a lot of ways. So the way a lot of parents deal with the stress of raising a family is to really put intimacy in their relationship on hold for a while. They say to themselves, we'll just wait until the kids are a little older. We'll wait until the job stress has calmed down, or we'll wait until we're finally caught up on all the things we need to do around the house and so forth. But what's the problem with that approach? Why is it important for partners to prioritize working on the relationship instead of just putting it on hold indefinitely?
Well, putting it on hold indefinitely is not a good idea. It is okay during certain periods of the relationship. So I'm thinking about, in particular, a period of time that in the book I call the do no harm period, which is about a year to a year and a half, maybe 2 years, depending on how good of a sleeper your kid is, after each child is born, where the relationship does have to wait. There may be periods of time where there's unusually high stress in career, where the relationship does have to wait. And so it's okay. It's a sign of a secure and healthy relationship that it's not a crisis if we can't show up for our partner all the time, that we can wait. The problem is that we get in the habit of asking for it to wait. And then we start treating it like a cactus, or maybe not even a cactus, maybe like a plastic plant that we can stick in the closet with no light and no water. So the problem is that when we get out of the habit of coming together, whether that's to be physically together, physically intimate, whether that's sex or whether that's snuggling or being physically close, or emotionally together, that connection, it gets harder and harder to. It might feel awkward. It might feel like there's more resentment built up. And so when we get out of the practice of doing that, and even during those periods of time where it's really important that the relationship is able to wait, that would be done with a lot of communication. I know you've been waiting. I know I've been busy. I know I've not been available. So even that is a connection, asking it to wait. It's just when the expectation is that we don't have to pay any attention to it. It gets really difficult to reconnect.
Yeah. And the other problem with putting the relationship on hold indefinitely and saying to yourself, well, we'll just wait until the family stress and the job stress and all these other things calm down. The problem is that those things often don't calm down. And, the stress just keeps increasing over time. And so there's not necessarily going to be a quote unquote better time to work on the relationship. And yes, I think you're absolutely right that there can be periods where you got to say, we need to put the relationship on hold for a little bit while we deal with this crisis or while we learn to adjust or adapt to having a child in our lives. But when the kid is born and then you wait until they go off to college to reconnect sexually, yeah, that's too long. And, I have seen that happen before. And the partners are just two entirely different people by that point in time and don't even know what they have in common anymore. And the longer that you wait to reconnect, the harder it is to really spark that connection again. But saying that you should make your relationship a priority is something that's easy to say, but it's harder to do in practice, especially with all of the other things you have going on in your life. So how do we actually do that? How can parents make their relationship a priority? And, what are some baby steps that they can maybe do to prioritize it so that it doesn't get put on hold indefinitely?
That's such a great question. So there's a larger philosophical answer, and then there's a very small practical answer. So I'm going to go with the small practical answer first, which is to really lean into what the Gottmans call rituals of connection. So in their work, they talk about small things often, which I really love because that is what connection is made up of. It's looking at your partner across a chaotic kitchen and catching their eye and smiling. Or it's initiating a 5-second hug in the middle of the chaos. So it's something that that ritual of connection. Maybe it's a kiss before they leave, or maybe it's sitting down and watching your favorite show together after the kids go to bed. But something that you can come back to again and again, like brushing your teeth, to the point where it can almost feel routine, but it's meaningful. It's something that is meaningful to both of you. This really varies couple to couple, what that is. And so encouraging people to really get curious about what those things might be that feel like these really meaningful rituals of connection. And then sort of the larger answer would be to really get honest about what it is that you want to prioritize together. And so if connecting is important, figuring out how to do that together, that can be complicated because especially as we're talking about sex, one of the things that so commonly happens, the most common thing that brings couples into sex therapy is a desire difference. And so a lot of times when there's a desire difference, the higher desire partner worries that their partner might not actually think that sex is important anymore. And the lower desire partner, I don't even like using the word low desire partner because it's all relative, but the lower desire partner will often feel like there's something wrong with them, or they may worry that their partner only wants to have sex with them, that they're not interested in connecting in other ways. So this sort of larger answer about prioritizing can get a little bit complicated. So leaning into those small rituals of connection first can be really helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's a great answer because when people hear the term prioritizing the relationship, that makes it sound like it has to be this really big thing. And for people who are already feeling overwhelmed and stressed out and that they've reached their limit, it's hard to say we need to add this one extra thing to it. But when you break it down that way, and there are these little, small, simple things that you can do on a daily basis to just still stay connected to your partner, I think that makes it seem a lot more manageable. So prioritizing the relationship can look like a lot of different things. And I think it can start with a lot of these little, small things, tiny moments where you just still have that opportunity to connect and remember that you have a relationship and you're not just co-parents or roommates, and that there's something more to it than that. Soaking Wet from BB Health is the world's first probiotic specifically designed for vaginal and vulvar wellness. It's a doctor-formulated blend of 2 prebiotics and 3 probiotics that promote total vaginal health, as well as 3 vitamins and minerals that promote vaginal wetness and overall sexual health. BB Health is on a mission to create supplements that actually work using scientifically backed ingredients. They take quality seriously, with each batch produced tested by 2 separate third-party laboratories for safety and effectiveness. They even share their third-party lab results publicly, which few other companies do. BB Health is a physician-owned and woman-owned business that has happy customers across all 50 states and in over 45 countries. Make every encounter slipperier, sexier, and downright sensational. It's time to get soaking wet and keep those good times coming, literally. And the best part? Soaking Wet is formulated by doctors at VB Health. Visit soakingwet.com and use code JUSTIN for 10% off, or click the link in the show notes. So let's talk about some of the specific struggles that parents experience and how to navigate them. One of them centers around attachment. So when a baby enters the picture, it's going to require a lot of love and attention. And when parents direct all of their love and attention to the child, they can start to feel that they're being neglected. And maybe they actually start to get a little bit jealous of the kid because the kid is getting all of this love and attention, but here I am and I'm not getting any of that from my partner. And if one of the partners has an insecure attachment style to begin with, that situation can be kind of triggering for them because they're just no longer getting the feelings of love or reassurance that they really need from their partner to feel secure in the relationship. So talk to us a little bit about how attachment dynamics can manifest in parenthood and how that can contribute to conflict and disconnection between partners.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, at sort of a really basic level, we are wired to connect with each other. Humans are connected creatures. It's a survival tactic. This attachment stuff is so hardwired. And anybody who doesn't have a secure attachment coming into the relationship is more at risk during this period of time And it can be really problematic between partners. And you mentioned the insecure attachment, but there's also like an avoidant attachment. There's other ways that this can really get tricky between people.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as we attach to our child, that's like the primary attachment. There's really some interesting research out there. They did it with mothers and babies, that the biological attachment, so the hormones that cause attachment in the mother and child, are the same hormones that are released during an orgasm and an adult attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And so the research is sort of this theory that actually that is the primary attachment, and that romantic attachment is sort of co-opted from that, which makes sense, right? Like, this is like really makes sense. And so then when a baby's added to the family, it really does shift things up a lot.
And it can almost feel like your partner's having an affair in that sense, right? Because they're directing all of their love and attention to someone else.
Yes, it can feel like your partner's having an affair when you're talking about, and typically this is, sort of the birthing partner or the primary partner who's doing a lot of the intensive parenting. And then the non-birthing or the non-primary partner, that can be split between like sort of the jealousy. And then for the birthing or the primary parent, they are often having these really rushes of hormones, bonding hormones, that can feel like actually having an affair. There's obsessive thinking. There's like this like really warm and fuzzy. And so they're actually getting their attachment and intimacy needs met in this relationship with their child. And so genuinely, the partner who's feeling jealous and feeling left out really maybe, like their partner may be like, okay, and now I'm done. Go away. I have no use for you anymore. And so it's good to be aware of this. It's not something that is really talked about in this way all that much. And so talking about it, normalizing it, and also recognizing that the bond between the two partners is really the foundation of the family. And so paying attention to that, even when it's difficult, again, sort of going back to making each other feel prioritized, is almost more important than the actual time spent together.
Yeah.
So there's that thing of feeling like, oh, I miss you so much. We can't be together because the baby is awake all night, or because there's so much happening in our lives right now, or because we're so busy, but I really miss you, as opposed to what it often feels like is sort of the indifference. So that piece is really important, to feel like you want to be together even when you can't.
Yeah, super important. Now, regardless of whether you have kids, anyone who's been in a long-term relationship can probably relate to the idea that there are times when your partner says or does something that just triggers you. For example, they might say something that you interpret as criticism or dismissiveness, even if it wasn't meant that way, but it kicks your fight or flight system into high gear. Then you get angry, then your partner gets defensive, and then things just spiral out of control, right? It's a negative cycle. And when you have insecure attachment dynamics at play there, it can make things worse because, for example, if you have one partner who's avoidant and the other who is anxious, then you've got one partner who's withdrawing and the other who's pursuing. And it can create this really destructive pattern that just repeats itself over and over and over again. So for parents who find themselves in situations like this, where they keep entering that negative cycle, how do you break it?
Okay, so this is the $1 million question. First of all, I just want to normalize that all couples get stuck in this way. Even those that have the most healthy, securely attached relationships are still going to sometimes have misattunements that result in this negative cycle. So the first thing to do when you find yourself in this place is, as difficult as it is, take a break. Because what happens when we feel disconnected from our beloved is that we end up having our nervous systems really react in a negative way to this. So we sort of go into this fight or flight mode. And when we're in that mode, we're really not able to do any perspective taking. It's really difficult to regulate emotion. And this is how these conflict and these negative cycles start to spin out of control. So the first thing is as soon as you notice that you're in this cycle with your partner, just take a break. And taking a break is different than storming off in a huff. It's actually taking an intentional break. So saying, I think we're getting stuck here. Can we just take a quick break? So that's number one. A lot harder than I'm making it sound here, by the way. Like, this is difficult. Even this first step is difficult. So then once you've taken a break, which probably should be a minimum of 5 minutes, but probably realistically more like 20, to have your nervous system calm and re-regulate, then you can come back and try to communicate in a little bit more of an open and vulnerable way. Because what ends up happening in this cycle, it feels like a threat. It feels like a threat to ourselves. It feels like a threat to our relationship. And so we respond by getting really protective for super good reason. But when we get protective, it actually ends up making us go out of connection. And when our partner feels us go out of connection with them, then they respond with their protectiveness. And so some examples of these protective behaviors, which, listeners will probably be really familiar with, either from themselves or feeling them from their partners, are like defensiveness, criticism, withdraw, blame. So all of these things are not productive for like a really deep communication and problem solving. So those 2 steps are really a good place to start.
Yeah, I think that's all great information and advice. And yes, I think you're also spot on in saying that no matter how securely attached you are, you can still have these dynamics that pop up. I think when we hear the term secure attachment, some people picture a person who is just completely secure in all ways, but that person doesn't exist. Everybody has something, at least something that they're insecure about. And that can show up in the relationship in a lot of different ways and contribute to or exacerbate these negative cycles. Now, the specific challenges that parents can face when it comes to sex and intimacy are going to depend to some extent on the age of their kids. So let's talk about that for a moment. I mean, we could do a whole podcast episode just on this topic because I know you have several chapters in your book devoted to infancy versus kids who are kind of like in that middle stage versus they're a little older. What are some of the different issues that pop up for parents who have kids of different ages, and how do we navigate them?
This is a great question and definitely a really big one. So when I was writing the book, I actually sort of felt conflicted about this because I wanted to make these specific enough that it would be helpful to couples who are struggling in different stages. And there are certainly some things in different ages that can really impact the relationship. The things that come to mind are during the newborn phase, right after a baby's born and nobody's sleeping and there's lots of hormones happening. This can be a period where there's lots of disconnection. Nobody's really thriving. You're sort of in a survival mode. And similarly, when we're talking about the stage of puberty, where you have teenage children, and this is likely to align with perimenopause and other midlife hormonal changes, that can definitely impact the relationship. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that when you have partners who are well aligned in their desire, there doesn't tend to be a lot of conflict, whether they're having sex 3 times a year or 3 times a day. If they're on the same page and they're aligned, then there's not an issue. It's only when they're not well aligned in their desire, which is more normal than not, then that causes pain and feelings of disconnection on both sides. So recognizing that it's actually the difference in desire rather than the individual desire of one partner or the other, or for the most part, whatever age and stage your kids are in, that can be really helpful to identify that.
Yeah, so true. And we see that happen over and over in relationships with and without kids. Desire discrepancies, one of the most common reasons that people go into sex therapy. So thanks for sharing all of this information with us, Rebecca. It was fantastic to hear from you and learn all about your work in this area. I'm really looking forward to continuing our conversation in the next episode and talking all about how to reconnect sexually with a partner. Can you please tell my listeners where they can go to learn more about your work and get a copy of your new book?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is available anywhere books are sold. And if people want to find me, they can do that on my website. It's Rebecca Udy. The last name is E as in Edward, UDY.com.
And the book is titled again?
It's called Parents in Love, A Guide to Great Sex After Kids.
And I'll be sure to include links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate having you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. To keep up with new episodes of this podcast, visit my website, Sex and Psychology, at sexandpsychology.com, or subscribe on your favorite platform, where I hope you'll take a moment to rate and review the show. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please consider becoming a Sex and Psychology Premium subscriber to enjoy ad-free listening for just $3.99 a month. You can also follow me on social media for daily sex research updates. I'm on Blue Sky and X at Justin Lehmiller and Instagram at Justin J. Lehmiller. Also, be sure to check out my book, Tell Me What You Want. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.